What we're debating here today is whether Ireland should opt into fully and wholesale the EU Migration Pact, and Sinn Féin's position is crystal clear: we should not. It is not in Ireland's interest. Ireland and Europe have seen a significant increase in migration rates for a number of years. In 2019, the number of people applying for international protection in this state was less than 5,000. The number last year was over 13,000, nearly tripling it in the space of 4 years. By the end of last month, 107,000 PPS numbers have been issued to the Ukrainian beneficiaries of temporary protection. And how migration is managed, or indeed mismanaged, impacts almost every facet of our economy and our society. The provisions of our public services, our social cohesion, the demands on our housing system. And this year, the number of asylum applications is likely to be in the region of 25,000. That as a state, we would essentially give up on our ability to take key decisions to respond to this is the wrong call for Ireland. Why would we opt into an EU pact that would not allow us to depart from ordinary procedures regarding supports and accommodation should our asylum system become overwhelmed without getting approval from the EU? A loss of sovereignty, restricting the state's ability to act and to respond quickly. Why would we pursue a wholesale adoption of this pact, which would open up us to the possibility of infringement proceedings and fines for issues that can and should be addressed here at home nationally? Why, as a small and neutral country, should we allow the European Union to determine from which conflicts and indeed which countries we should take programme refugees? Again, decisions that we can and should address here nationally. We can create and manage a fair, efficient and enforced migration system without a blanket and indiscriminate opt-in to this EU pact. Our current asylum system and migration system is in crisis. This fact is no better illustrated by the spectre of tents pitched across this city, or the sight of a poor, vulnerable woman taking water from a bucket from the River Liffey to use for her personal use by her tent. As I've said, in the region of 25,000 asylum applications are expected this year. If last year's trends continue, then 62% of them will have their asylum applications refused by the International Protection Office. That's over 15,000 refusals, determinations that they're not entitled to refuge here in this state. Yet those who are refused in the past and those who will be refused in the future wait months, even years, to be processed or notified of the refusal, and then there are genuine questions as to whether these decisions will ever be enforced. While so many, on the other hand, vulnerable people fleeing war, fleeing persecution, who are entitled to protection here, face unacceptable conditions in this state. The Irish people, I believe, Iascaigh Comhairle, are a compassionate people. Our values are those of decency and fairness, and that is what people want to see. But the reality is that decent and compassionate people are questioning the fairness of the system that is currently operating. And is it fair that individuals who are only a few euros above the medical card threshold are denied it and the entitlements that it provides, while certain people on temporary protection beneficiaries gain automatic entitlement to it regardless of their income, regardless of their employment status? These differences which are being made are undermining social cohesion. Where housing and accommodation are in such short supply, the government have created a system where some temporary protection applicants have greater access to private rental accommodation, with landlords getting €800 tax-free from the state by renting out accommodations to beneficiaries of temporary protection, providing more money to them than they would get if they rented out in the private market in many areas across the state. It's built in an incentive for landlords to accept one over the other when the housing need of both are acute. And with nearly 4,000 additional rental homes being provided to beneficiaries of temporary protection so far this year, an additional 1,000 each month, you can see why more and more people are questioning the fairness of this, that this is provided regardless of income, regardless of employment status. And how can this do anything other than create competition, resentment and inequality where our already dysfunctional rental market exists? And these are only hairline fractures in the government's asylum and migration policy. But the deeper cracks in the system are leading to inhumane conditions for the vulnerable and creating discord within our communities. Instead of addressing these failings and creating an immigration system that is fair, that is efficient, that is enforced, we now have the prospect of government taking a leap into the dark with a wholesale opt-in to this migration pact. There are only two elements of this pact that are in Ireland's interest to adopt: returning those who seek to make an asylum application here to the first country where they sought international protection and the solidarity clause, and also sharing the fingerprint database. And I'll finish on this. The Minister wishes to portray this pact as the solution to our problems, when in fact we can do much of what it provides right here, right now. This is the wrong decision, an all-or-nothing approach which will restrict our ability to determine our own migration rules, binding us to regulations that will undermine our sovereignty and lead to bad outcomes. It should be for an Irish government to decide on the key pillars of our migration system. So signing into this migration pact wholesale and outsourcing our immigration policy to the EU is not the solution. It is not in Ireland's interest, and it should be rejected here in the Dáil.